Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Oh well, you guys want to go ahead and get into this? Alright. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
The Comics Kid 2099.
And Deadpoolzilla. Hello, everyone.
Hello. Ruben's like confused and scared. And Deadpoolzilla's like fake enthusiasm. I dig it.
Well, I was like, because I completely forgot we were doing a recording today, so I have to take my way through this.
Okay.
It's the only way, Ian.
That's how important.
It's the only way, Ian.
That's how important you are to Deadpoolzilla, folks. He forgets about you, but don't worry, I would never forget about you. Whatever your name is.
You can go fuck yourself.
So Ruben picked our topic discussion today. Ruben, what are we discussing today?
Well, this is kind of a companion piece to one that Deadpoolzilla picked a couple weeks ago. Today we are talking about heroes turning into villains in pop culture.
Yep. So what made you want to talk about this in particular?
Well, not just because we had already kind of talked about the reverse, but also when I was looking through a list of, like, I was kind of doing some research for this topic, which sometimes I do that, most of the time I don't, but looking at, like, a lot of the famous heroes turned villains online, I realized this isn't nearly as common as villains turning into heroes, and I feel like I know why it happens, and I wish that it happened more, because a lot of the versions that I saw were either possessed by some outside force, like it was later retconned that Hal Jordan was possessed by an evil space cockroach, or Jean Grey was possessed by an evil Firebird. So, like, and that was even later revealed to not even be the real Jean Grey. So, like, you know, a lot of times whenever you do something like that, it's like, just kidding, it wasn't really their fault, because it would be extremely out of character for this person who has risked their life to save millions of people to suddenly want to kill millions of people. And so that's the reason why they don't do it. But I wish that we saw more like, okay, here's a character who, for organic reasons and not like possession, is turning into an antagonist of some kind. I wish we saw more of that in pop culture, and we don't really see a whole lot of it, it seems like.
Well, what's particularly interesting about that to me is, I was trying to think of like particular examples, and everything that I found, it was either done after they were already a villain to give them a heroic origin, or it was like they were kind of always destined to be a villain eventually. They just have the background of one time they weren't. And I really have to strain to think of someone who, like, had a legitimate long-term turn to villainy from being the heroic type character. And oddly enough, all I've got is Penelope from the Sly Cooper franchise.
Oh, I've never... is that video games?
Yeah.
Oh, I've never played them.
Okay, well, spoiler for the fourth game. My bad, but yeah, that's a whole thing. She's introduced in the third game, is the girlfriend of one of the side characters, and then in the fourth game, she ends up being the main villain.
Okay.
Yeah, like, it's really hard to think of someone who, like... Because, like, immediately my mind went to Two-Face, right? Who Harvey Dent has this, like, you know, heroic background as the district attorney, all that stuff. But, like, he was always going to be a villain. They
Yeah.
just gave him it's a villain with a tragic background.
Kind of the same with Mr. Freeze.
I wouldn't even call Mr. Freeze a hero. He's just like a normal dude.
Fair enough, yeah. And that's the same, like, when I was looking this up, like, Harry Osborn was listed, and, like, Harry Osborn was just a civilian roommate. Like, he wasn't a heroic person, he was just a normal guy who turned into a villain. So, like, I had trouble thinking of him as a hero also. But yeah, Mr. Freeze, your fair point, he was just a scientist.
Yeah, so it's really a lot of strain. Deadpoolzilla, you got anyone that comes to mind?
Well, aside from one guy we're probably going to be talking about a lot, I would say like another person who kind of had a fall from grace kind of moment would be like, I don't know, like, because it's always like, it feels weird when when you know you got to retcon things, and sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. I would say what was a interesting like fall from grace was Jason Todd's fall from grace.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and Jason Todd's all over this map, isn't he?
Yeah.
Hero, villain, anti-hero, villain, no one knows what to do with him.
We talked a little bit about him a couple weeks ago. Do you guys think because I kind of had him on my notes as anti-hero. Do you think he would work better if when he came back, like, wow, it was probably 12 years ago now, when he came back, do you think it would have just been better if they said, okay, he's a villain now. He's not an anti-hero. He's not going to be allied with the Bat family. He's just going to be a villain who...
Well, that's what they did. Like, no one talks about this because they cut it out of the movie, but, like, dude bombed Bloodhaven in the comics. He fucking nuked Bloodhaven in the comics when he came back.
He fucking dropped a nuclear monster like an atom bomb.
Yes.
Was that him, or was that the Secret Society of Supervillains?
No, that was Jason Todd. As a big fuck you to Batman, he dropped a nuclear bomb. A nuclear man, whatever. It's fucking comic books.
No, it was Chemo.
Whatever.
Yeah.
I don't fucking give a shit. It's comic books. He dropped a nuke on Bloodhaven. Like, he was straight villain. There was no, like, ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like, he had this whole, like, moral code thing, but so does Captain Cold, goddammit. And, I mean, certainly nuking Bloodhaven probably broke that moral code, but he was just really emotional. So, yeah, like, no, Jason Todd was definitely a villain, and Grant Morrison and Judd Winnick, honestly, had him on the path to be villain. Like, full villain. You know, Judd Winnick wrote Red Hood: The Lost Days, and Jason was still a villain in that. Jason was... Grant Morrison was setting up Jason to be Dick Grayson's Joker when Dick Grayson was Batman. Jason Todd most definitely was meant to be a villain when he was first brought back, and then, I don't know, because of the girl that I had 2 classes with in college who saw him as like this really tragic anti-hero, they decided to just go with that. I remember having arguments with this girl where she's like, no, Batman sucks, Jason Todd's like a beautiful monster. I'm like, fuck you, you just ruin everything.
Oh, did she say beautiful monster?
Yeah, I think so. Something like that.
Oh, hot topic bullshit is that?
I know!
Go listen to your Evanescence and cry, you bitch.
Oh, don't get that mean. It's just, it's stupid. So no, Jason Todd was definitely a villain when he was brought back. And then they just slowly started moving that goalpost and, you know.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit about that last week because I must have missed all of the comics where Red Hood was a straight up villain, because most of what I've seen plays him more in the anti-hero line, or at the very least just very antagonistic, but not necessarily villainous. I'm very surprised that he was involved with bombing Bloodhaven, because I was 99% sure that was the Secret Society that did that. But I'm like, I haven't read Red Hood Lost Days, so that's one that I've always kind of seen him, because a lot of books play him like where he's working with the Bat family, like since he came back, and so I've still, not to be like, I don't see him as a beautiful, tragic anti-hero, but I do see him as working on the side of the angels more than being on the side of the villains.
No, you're definitely right. Like, that's how they just chose to play him over time. And again, if you want good Jason Todd, I'll defend, as problematic as it is, I'll defend Under the Red Hood. No, sorry, just Under the Hood. And then, of course, retitled Under the Red Hood once the movie came out. And then Red Hood Lost Days, Batman and Robin, his appearances there, and Batman Battle for the Cowl are all really, really good stories that play Jason Todd as the villain. Like, he almost kills Tim Drake at one point. It's good. And then it just starts to, like, I think it all went downhill around Scott Snyder, when Snyder decided to have him get involved in the whole death of the family thing. But that's neither here nor there. So I'm just, Google searching, looking up stuff, and a character who has, again, this trope of hero in their background, but kind of was always the villain since introduction, is Ozymandias from Watchmen.
Yeah.
Like, his character is that he was a hero turned villain, but that was just the background for the story. As far as we're concerned as readers, Ozymandias was always the villain in Watchmen. Besides us as people, but still. I don't know. Just throwing that one out there.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, when I was thinking of heroes turned into villains, I really wasn't thinking of characters who, from their conception, were intended to become villains by their creators. So, like, Ozymandias, in his story, started off as a hero and then becomes a villain, so technically he fits. But from the beginning, they were thinking, okay, we need a bad guy for this story, so they had Ozymandias. In the same way, like, I wasn't really thinking of Two-Face because he's introduced in whatever comic in 1940 as Two-Face, and like his origin story, he's a civil servant, but like I wasn't really thinking of, like, I guess it'd be different if there was like 4 or 5 years of Harvey Dent being Batman's ally in the comics and then he becomes Two-Face, and they did that like retroactively, like with Year One and Long Halloween and stuff. But
you also got like that's how they introduced him in Batman the Animated Series. Is he was just Harvey Dent for a long time in that first season.
Yeah.
Now here's an interesting one, because of how conceptually was made was, how do you guys feel about Hulk being looked as a villain? Because it's interesting because he's played the role of both hero and villain in multiple stories.
I like it. He's actually one on my list I had like separated from the rest because I was like, hey, like when I saw his name, I was thinking he's one who actually I think works better than a lot of these others.
Yeah, I could see it. I don't know if I really consider the Hulk a villain so much as just a threat that pops up from time to time when he goes a little off the rails.
I've always considered like Hulk how I consider Godzilla, like a force of nature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I guess you're talking about World War Hulk, aren't you, Deadpoolzilla?
Well, not even World War Hulk. Like, I'm talking about like the time he destroyed Las Vegas, the time he went on a rampage in New York. I could pick and choose from Peter David era multiple stories where he played both hero and villain, and that was like I could even say Gray Hulk even.
Okay.
And I haven't read a lot of Peter David stuff. I really want to, but there's like 2 volumes of the Visionaries that are like crazy out of print, and I don't want to read any of it until I have all of it. But like, with World War Hulk, he's tricked into getting on a spaceship, and then he is sent to this hellish planet by his people he thought were friends, and then he finds happiness on that world, and then the spaceship blows up, so he blames the people who sent him there in the first place. Then he comes back to Earth and invades and basically tries to take over the planet. And so, like, it's one of those things where while he he had a tragic reason for doing what he was doing. I think by that point he became a villain, and it was one of the few times where I think I could have bought him staying as a villain. They didn't keep him that way long because World War Hulk led right into Jeff Loeb's run, where Red Hulk was kind of the main character. But like
that's garbage.
Oh yeah. I've only read probably the first volume of that, and that's all I needed to read. But
pro tip, Ruben, if you ever get a chance, go check out the Jeff Parker run of Red Hulk, because it's actually pretty good.
Okay, well, it would have to be better than Jeff Loeb's run.
Well, they actually it's actually kind of fun because like Ross is like treated as like a secret agent working for Captain America.
Huh. That I would not have thought that'd be where they'd go. That I'm intrigued. But yeah, like if they had decided after World War Hulk to have Hulk be like an enemy of the superheroes for like another 2 or 3 years, I could have very easily seen them doing that, and it would not have felt out of character. Like you look at other instances, like when Daredevil took over the Hand, or when like Superman is a bad guy in alternate realities most of the time, or like when Captain America in Secret Empire, and a lot of people didn't like that. Most people are going to say, yeah. Like, and most people are going to say, like, hey, that's out of character. I think with the Hulk, it's not out of character. I think somehow he works as both a heroic character, and he could work as a villain if they wanted to take him in that direction.
Yeah. It's the same with Godzilla, where he could work as both hero and villain, and no one would question it.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Well, it just depends on what situation you put him in. Because, yeah, you're right. Both of those characters are a bit of a just force of nature, and so like I guess I go back to Ed Norton's line from Incredible Hulk. Maybe I can't control it, but maybe I can aim it. And that's kind of what I just think of for the Hulk a lot of the time. At least the Hulk I like, where it's just, you know, he's not doing anything wrong intentionally. He's just kind of like a child.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I go for.
You would actually, Ian, like the Mark Waid Indestructible Hulk run. Because it's Hulk working for S.H.I.E.L.D., but it's not like, oh, Hulk can do this. It's like Banner loans the Hulk out high-risk missions so he can work on, like, he can get access to different science and stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's a... See, Hulk is weird because every time a new creative team comes on board, they pretty much completely undo everything that came in the previous run. Because
Welcome to comics.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with Hulk, it's worse than anything else, I think. Like, any other series, I think, is going to at least somewhat keep some of the stuff that came before. But with Hulk, like, there is no status quo with Hulk. And, like, Jason Aaron did, like, a year-long run on Hulk where Bruce Banner was a bad guy. And Hulk was trying, like, there was, like, a half-year run on it called Stay Angry, where Hulk was trying to prevent himself from becoming Bruce Banner because Bruce Banner was doing some shady stuff. And then, like, he would wake up after being Banner, and then he'd be in some really horrible situation. And that actually was immediately before the Mark Waid run. And I've enjoyed what I read of the Waid run. I haven't read a lot of it, but Waid kind of, and, you know, fair enough, Waid probably didn't have any interest in doing Bruce Banner as a villain, but, like, you know, I already talked about how World War Hulk plays Hulk as a villain. I think Banner could have worked as a villain, too, because with a lot of these characters, like, you have someone like Hal Jordan who committed genocide and everyone hated it because it wasn't in character for a selfless hero to become a genocidal maniac, or like Cassandra Cain, who became like the leader of this mob and was killing a bunch of people after she had like 70-something issues developing her as a hero. With Bruce Banner, I don't feel like there's a lot of people who liked the character of Bruce Banner. I think because he's a dual protagonist, he doesn't have as much going on, and he's got a lot of not necessarily mental problems, but like mental anguish, a lot of like stuff mental scarring, I guess. And so I find it more believable that Banner could become a villain in his own story. And I would also find that, like, if they had gone a few years with that, I think that could have worked.
Maybe. I guess, like, on the idea of characters that were changed radically, but it actually sticking. Superboy Prime?
Yeah.
Because, like, he's introduced at first as just, like, yeah, another version of Superboy, blah, 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 and he's, like, kind of, you know, put in this little cage in the outside the multiverse for decades. And then Johns comes around, and, like, this dude turns, and he turns permanently.
Hard.
Yeah. Like, Superboy Prime's never being redeemed. I just don't see it, you know?
Oh, you mean the guy who ruined reality with his punch?
Well, like, there's that, and it's funny that we're connecting back to this, because that's, of course, Jason Todd's resurrection. There's that, but then there's just, like, you know, he just is straight crazy. Like, he just burns the Superman symbol into his fucking chest, and, like, he fucking kicks the shit out of, Sodom Yacht in the
which is
Sinestro War.
Which is honestly the fight between Sodom Yacht and Superboy Prime is like one of the best fights in comics I've ever seen.
It's fucking epic as shit. And, like, Superboy Prime's fucking nuts in that thing. He just, like, in the middle of the fight, he just randomly grabs a rock and uses laser vision to inscribe Sodom Yacht's gravestone. And it just uses it to mock him.
There's also, like, I've looked at other characters, like, let's not forget the Kingdom Come Superman.
I'm sorry, you were, like, cutting out really bad throughout that whole sentence.
Sorry, like, Superboy Prime also killed the Superman from Kingdom Come and Superboy.
God, I'm not catching... I'm catching, like, a third of that.
Alright, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Alright, Superboy Prime killed both Superboy and the Kingdom Come Superman.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Jeez, I'm like, God, you gotta get, like, a fucking antenna for your cell phone
there's
or
nothing
something.
I can do about it.
I'm thinking with Superboy Prime, the reason that stuck and will stick is because, A, that's a character that they hadn't used in 30 years, and so it wasn't like he had this tremendous fan base, and B, there was already so many other versions of Superman that it's not like you're ruining the one version of this character. Like, with Hal Jordan, it's the Hal Jordan, and it's the one and only Hal Jordan. It's not like Hal Jordan from this other reality who becomes evil. It's our Hal Jordan, and so that's why people will get angry. And Hal Jordan had been around for 30 years when they made him evil. So, like, I feel like maybe that's why it sticks with Superboy Prime, because they hadn't been using him in so long, and they brought him back only to turn him into a villain. And then we had other Supermen that, and then, of course, he kills two of them, but, like, we had our Superman who is still maintaining his heroic integrity.
Yeah. Now, like, here's another character that, well, went, who kind of went rogue in other universes. Reed Richards, because the whole Council of Reeds, oh, wow.
Council of Ricks.
That's actually where the Council of Reeds is where they got the idea for Council of Ricks.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's funny.
You could thank Hickman for that.
Yeah,
it's so funny to, like, find out about a thing from the parody of it. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And
Now, like, there are other other falls from grace, but there's good reasons. Like, I wouldn't say that he became a full-on villain, but Cyclops' like, quote-unquote fall from grace, which, you know, it was totally understandable, because after AVX, he was like, our mutants are coming back, and it's back to business for the human race. So I'm going to do what I can, and everyone else just labeled him a villain for it.
Mm-hmm.
And he did, like, during AVX he did kill Xavier, but at the same time it's like, well, he was under the influence of the Phoenix Force, and everyone gives him shit for it.
Mm-hmm. And that's a weird situation, because, like, the Marvel Universe was being handled very differently depending on who was writing a book. Like, in an Avengers book, like, humanity didn't really hate mutants, but then in the X-Men books, like even depending on which X-Men book you were reading, like in one X-Men book, mutants were being arrested for being mutants, and then in another one, everything was like beer and Skittles. So like that was it was really weird seeing Cyclops be handled differently in each book, because in some of them he's reacting very reasonably, and in others he is a straight up villain. So that was like, if they had been more consistent across the board, that might have worked better, or at least been more understandable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one, like, I think people are still to this day like bitter about that, and still like arguing about whether Cyclops was justified in what he did.
Oh, I'm right there with it. Now let me ask you this: what are some heroes you could see become villains? Because I got a few.
Oh, Punisher.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Punisher. I would say Iron Man.
Yeah, I could see that.
Well, because Tony, like, even though he claims to be totally fine, if you read any of his story arcs, like especially Armor Wars or Demon in a Bottle, you can clearly see that dude is like a furlong away from going batshit crazy.
Mm-hmm. I would, if they did it with Tony, I would want it to be like a long running thing where it's like it takes like 50 or 60 issues where he slowly descends into like where he thinks he's doing the right thing, but he's a control freak, and so it's like where he does something where it's like he feels like he has to be the one in control of this situation, and everyone else sees him like descending into villainy. That's how I would want to see it happen.
Yeah, like Civil War Tony, but to the extreme, like in Superior Iron Man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I had mentioned Hulk earlier. I think both Hulk and Bruce Banner I think could, under certain circumstances, work very well as a villain.
Yeah. Now,
it's weird that we're all going to Marvel characters.
Speaking of Marvel, how about Secret War, Secret Empire? So many secrets.
Yeah. No, it's weird that we go straight to Marvel, but like I'm trying to think of DC characters, and it's not like we haven't done it. We've done a villainous Batman and a villainous Superman, but you know, there's always like that's not really them, right? I'm really trying my hardest to see who I could see going over it. And just DC is such a brighter universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously not on film, but still. Like, I just have such a hard time. I could never imagine Wonder Woman being a villain. Like, what would that even be?
Well, if you look at Injustice, then you'll see what it is.
Nah, well, no one cares.
Well, here's another one who fell from grace, Maxwell Lord.
Maxwell Lord was a good guy?
Yeah,
he was throughout Justice League International, he was a good guy. He was like their Nick Fury, and then out of nowhere, Jeff Johns had him blow Ted Kord's brains out.
Wow. I never knew that. I just remember Maxwell Lord getting his neck snapped like a dry twig. That's all I think about.
Yeah. You know, for all the times Jeff Johns says, "Oh, I prefer good and, wholesome stories without, dark and gritty," he's kind of a hypocrite at points.
Oh, certainly. Huh.
Talking about characters that you could see becoming villainous, I would say like any character who has time travel as part of their motif. So like Booster Gold or Rip Hunter, I think I could potentially see both of them like visiting a future where it's like, oh wow, this is horrible. I've got to go back and make sure this doesn't happen, and then like their actions kind of be seen as like the ends justify the means. They've kind of done that before. I've seen that story before played out, like in the Marvel universe, in the X-Men. But I could potentially see that with those characters, maybe.
Yeah. But what else? Like, I guess like for other characters, and it's kind of hard. Like again, for DC, it's kind of difficult because like it feels like it doesn't feel right. Like Injustice, where you have an evil Superman and evil Wonder Woman, and I'm like, this feels really wrong. Whereas Marvel, if you ever see like them become villains, you're like, it makes sense in a weird way.
Yeah, the only one it doesn't work with is Cap, which
Right.
despite Nick Spencer's better efforts, it just doesn't work. It's just not believable. I don't know. I guess I could maybe say Aquaman, depending on the version, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you got the Peter David Aquaman, and I could see him kind of going overboard. Ha 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 ha.
It took me way longer to get that than I should have.
It was completely by accident, but I was so happy.
I got it right at. I got it the moment you said it. So fuck you, Ian.
Yeah, like in the DC animated universe, Aquaman is like at the brink of starting war with the surface world when he's reintroduced in Justice League. So like I could see that version of Aquaman being an enemy of mankind and being like the kind who's like he has a code, but he's also like still going to do some really horrible stuff because he believes it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, pretty much. Just the idea that he's like, no, you know what? I'm a sovereign king, and my authority isn't being respected. So no, I'm declaring war on the surface world and resigning from the Justice League, and that's just what's happening. Like, I could see that. It would, and that would definitely put him in the role of, like, it's not like he'd be a villain without reason, but it would definitely put him in the role of villain.
I want to go back and rewatch those episodes of Justice League now.
Yeah, that's a good show. Trying to think of other stuff. Like, I guess, it's weird that we haven't talked about Sinestro, because his whole thing is that he's a fall from grace character. But then he was kind of like, when you find out about his actual history, he was kind of always an awful person, and he just got the ring by accident.
Yeah, I don't know enough about Sinestro. I think I have that whole series in trade. I just recently got
Emerald Dawn, Part 2, 90 Days. Ugh, God.
No, I haven't read that. I meant like his solo series.
Oh, okay. No, the Cullen Bunn. I don't know if he got into that. I mean, someone really desperately should go back and retell that, because there's some interesting ass stuff going on in there. It's just told terribly, and Hal Jordan's in jail for drunk driving. It's stupid.
So why does he drive? Why doesn't he use his ring?
It was before he got the ring. He got the ring.
Oh, okay.
He got the ring after he was on the run from paralyzing someone because he was driving drunk one night.
What the hell?
It's a
awesome.
stupid fucking series.
So let me ask you. So I guess we could talk about the one who's the ultimate fall from grace character, Anakin.
Oh yeah. No, I had him at the top of my list.
Oh yeah, I forgot about him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we could arguably say he's kind of like Harvey Dent or like Saruman or something like that, where it's like from the beginning. Well, I think we can maybe agree. If you watch A New Hope, it doesn't seem like they actually planned for Darth Vader to be Anakin, but like once they made that connection, it's from the beginning he was a villain in their eyes, and then they went back and created that heroic backstory for him. But it's still very interesting to see them at least attempt to make that play that out in film.
It works a lot better than like the Harvey Dent thing, I think, because Harvey Dent's designed to be a villain. Anakin Skywalker was designed to be a hero,
Mm-hmm.
Like, Harvey Dent's got this fatal flaw. Anakin Skywalker, not as much. Anakin Skywalker's the chosen one, and then it goes wrong. So, I don't know. That's definitely really interesting. It helps when you watch stuff that's not the prequels. I always say this: if you want the good version of Anakin Skywalker's character, go watch the Clone Wars series. That's his story done right. It's got everything you need. You don't even need to watch the prequels if you watch that, I think. So
yeah, I've never seen any. Well, I saw the Jindy Tartakovsky Clone Wars shorts, but I don't think that's what you're talking about, is it?
No, I'm talking about the 3D one.
Okay.
Yeah, that's I hashtag unpopular opinion. The 2D Clone Wars sucks.
Agreed. I bought those on DVD like a long time ago. Watched it and I was like, why is everyone like this? Like anyway, I didn't like those.
Okay, good. You and me against the internet, Ruben. Yeah, so that's definitely where Anakin's character is the most, though, is in the 3D Clone Wars series, as far as I'm concerned. That has, like, the great things where he's got so much just raw talent and ability, and you can see he just slowly gets lost in the changing atmosphere of the Republic as it slowly becomes the Empire, and it's just so fucking fascinating. There's this great scene where he's walking alongside Tarkin before Tarkin's really risen up the ranks of the military when he's a younger man. He's walking next to Tarkin, and they're having a conversation about how while he doesn't love the Jedi's,
Part 4.
Okay, man, come on. Like, I can't... Yeah, he's having this whole conversation about how he doesn't like the Jedi's tactics sometimes, and how he wishes they could compromise more, but it just can't be that way. And Tarkin's like, I didn't realize the Jedi were so open, and so it's just this really... it's murky, and you can kind of see Anakin start to slip very slowly. It's perfect. That's where the hero to villain is handled so damn well.
Yeah. And there's real quick, I love that scene where they're like shaking hands and Anakin's using his robot hand and you can hear the Imperial March in the background.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then there's also that really great episode where they're on the Force planet and Anakin gets shown his vision of the future and he's just fucking wrecked by it. Such a good-ass show. I need to go ahead and finish Rebels, too, because I've quite liked that. But yeah, lots of good stuff done with Anakin. Almost to the point where it's not even worth talking about, because it's just that's just like the best version of the trope, right?
I would say so.
That's like the embodiment of the trope, really.
Mm-hmm. Like, it's because Lucas very intentionally was trying to write the trope as a story. Like the Luke Skywalker story is the hero's journey. It's written to be the trope of the hero's journey, like beat for beat. And Anakin Skywalker, as poorly as it's handled, is written to be the fall from grace, beat for beat. It's like so to formula, and that's just how Star Wars is. It's meant to be very formulaic in that manner.
Yeah, and even though it is very much like, it's formulaic, but not necessarily in a bad way. Like, I think sometimes when you say formulaic, like, it can sound like it's an insult, or it's like it's not a compliment. But I think the Star Wars movies were always intended to be like, almost like, modern day fairy tales, and like fairy tales are a formula. Like there's a set of rules you follow, and so like, I think that can work, like using that trope and really like making that trope a thing, like you guys said. Because before Anakin Skywalker, I can't think of any heroes turned villains like in pop culture, really, other than like like Saruman and Harvey Dent, who were just introduced and almost immediately like, okay, they're a villain. So like, I think Anakin is like a good example of like, years of heroics and then like becoming the villain. I don't know. I think it works.
I don't know. I think that trope goes back further than you give it credit for.
Here's an interesting subject for your whole thing of giving it credit to like that trope being around longer. That kind of falls in the story of Lucifer.
Yeah, Lucifer comes to mind. That's a good one. I was going to go with Hercules. But yeah, Lucifer works. What is that? Paradise Lost? By Milton. Yeah. I remember reading that in middle school, and it made a girl I had a crush on flirt with me, and I had no idea how to react to it. It was so bizarre. But anyway, Ian's...
I don't know how to respond to that.
It was a strange interaction. I was like, oh man, how do I talk to her? She's like, oh, that looks like an interesting book. I'm like, yeah. No, but like, Paradise Lost has that whole line where Satan's portrayed very, very, very favorably, and like has this whole internal logic and thing and stuff that you are meant to relate to and understand. And he's got that whole line: "'Tis better to rule in hell than serve in heaven." And like, you know, you realize that Lucifer was kind of cheated. And the interesting thing is Paradise Lost is, of course, one of the two works outside of the Bible that are basically dogma. The other being Dante's Inferno.
Yeah. I had forgotten about Paradise Lost. I actually haven't read it. What were you thinking of when you thought of Hercules? Are you thinking of him killing his family?
Yeah, like Hercules, that was like his thing over and over again. Same with Jason of the Argonauts. Jason ended up going like the whole fall from grace thing too. But yeah, Hercules, like his whole thing is he had to do the heroic tasks, and then Hera drove him crazy, and he killed his family, and he had to do more heroic tasks, and then Hera drove him crazy again, and he killed his family again, and he did more heroic tasks. And you realize at a certain point it's just kind of irresponsible for him to keep having families. But yeah, Hercules was up and down that roller coaster. But yeah, I think Deadpool's always on it. John Milton with Lucifer is a much better example.
Yeah. And I think, like, and since I know nothing about Paradise Lost, I was just going to say something about Hercules real quick. I feel like that's kind of in the line of, like, Hal Jordan was possessed by a space cockroach, and, like, Jean Grey was possessed by a firebird. Like, Hera kind of took over his mind, right? Or I don't know enough about the Greek mythology. I've read about Greek mythology, but I haven't actually read accounts of it. Like, I haven't read, here's the story of Hercules killing his family. You know, I've read like the Odyssey or parts of the Odyssey, but you know, I'm not well versed in Greek mythology enough to be able to make a statement about that. But I would say that almost falls in line with it's not necessarily his fault. It's more like he was driven to it by a villain, you know, like outside forces kind of taking over his body, sort of.
Yeah, that's certainly fair. So it just seems like. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. No, I was just gonna say, you know what we don't do a lot of in comics? We don't talk about the PTSD that some heroes have to go through when dealing with that. Like Hal, I don't recall Hal ever have to deal with, like, you know, Parallax made me do things and make me go against my own friends, or, you know, we don't really deal with the trauma that the Phoenix leaves on Jean Grey or anyone else it possesses. Or even like Jean-Luc... Well, the only one that really dealt with it was Jean-Luc Picard when he was taken over and turned into Locutus.
Oh, no, I think Hal Jordan definitely dealt with it throughout a lot of John's run. It's just Hal's a very kind of down-to-earth, you know, red-blooded guy who's like, listen, it happened, I'm moving on. But, like, that you could tell he's kind of, like, burying it a little bit. And like, anytime someone brought it up, that was Hal Jordan's trigger, was talking about his time as Parallax. Hal Jordan got pissed and just, if he wasn't about to beat the shit out of someone, he was fighting himself to not do it. It got pretty ridiculous, and usually when he wouldn't do it, Guy Gardner would, on his behalf. So yeah, they've definitely dealt with it in a way with Hal, but no, to your point about the heroes dealing with PTSD, Heroes in Crisis, Tom King's Sanctuary, very excited for that. Just throwing that out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like, I really would like to see, like, how certain characters are just kind of dealing with, yeah, I had this god in my head, essentially, make me try to kill a vast majority of my friends. How do I walk away from that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And like, you know, I think you could even do a story where it's like a hero gets possessed by some outside force, and then, like, you can make the argument, like, yeah, it was the outside force's fault, so it's not out of character for the hero. But, like, does Hal Jordan, like, see, I haven't read enough of the post-retcon stuff where it's revealed that it was an outside being, but, like, does Hal Jordan remember what Parallax made him do, or is it kind of like, Okay, see, that
Yeah.
would be really interesting to see him, like, where he's struggling with, like, okay, was that parallax making me do that? Or how much of that was me doing it, and how much of it was this outside force just, like, pushing me in that direction? I think that'd be really interesting. Like, you could, I'd love to see them, you could even just do a creator-owned book, like, start a character who's possessed by some evil god, and then afterwards they're like, hey, how much of that was in me already? I'd love to see that explored somewhere.
Mm-hmm. That could be interesting. I don't know. You know, it's weird to think about the whole Hercules thing and realize how long not only the trope of turning the hero into a villain, but the way in which we justify it happening has been around.
Mm-hmm.
That's the part that I find interesting, is the idea of possession, of being out of your mind, is the way that we handle that. Because I think it goes to why this trope is used but so underutilized as far as like taking a character who is not destined to be a villain, like Lucifer or Anakin Skywalker. Taking a character who is not destined for it, and then turning them into a villain naturally. We use that so seldom, and it seems because we have a lack of imagination of being able to look up to someone and then see them become that which we hate so much.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like we have a lack of imagination for explaining why that would happen to someone. Which is weird, because I feel like that's so much more of a real life thing than anything else. That person that you look up to and really admire, who then does a thing and is just the worst kind of person for it. And like that's so much more realistic than anything else, and yet we have such a hard time imagining the idea that it's kind of always been there.
Mm-hmm.
Because of course, and I this has a lot to do, I feel, with the fact that heroic characters are fictionalized to the point of being these shining symbols and not necessarily being real people. And we're, of course, talking about real people who are a mix of good and bad. Everyone's got their issues, right? So, I don't know, it's weird that I'm trying to think of more flawed heroes that this could happen to. Heroes that have a more direct flaw. And maybe that explains why the Marvel universe is so much easier to go to for this than the DC universe, because they're more mythic, whereas Marvel's more down to earth.
And also why Captain America is the exception to the rule, because he was created in the 40s when most of those characters, there was less of a distinction between the Marvel universe and the DC universe in the 40s than there was in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
So like Captain America, coming from the 40s, he's very much from a different time period, and so he is a very different kind of character than his contemporaries, like, you know, the Fantastic Four and the other Avengers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know, that's really interesting the more you think about it. It's just we have this lack of ability to imagine that people can be wrong from the beginning, and that's what turns them into a villain. We kind of have to go to space demon.
I could see Daredevil being an honest-to-God villain, but they kind of did that and threw in the demon in Shadowland, which honestly the whole thing sucked. But given Daredevil's, mental state and how he kind of like distanced himself emotionally from the other heroes, you could see like a good heel turn from him and make it fluid.
I suppose so. The more I'm thinking about Secret Empire, and like it was a mess, obviously, but there was an interesting idea in that, wherein part of the commentary was meant to be you shouldn't trust someone too much to give them too much faith, too much power. And I feel that's probably the most that something has commented on the idea of idolizing someone too much, to look beyond their flaws, or even question the idea that they have any.
In the same way, and you know, I haven't read the Secret Empire event, but I agree that seems to be kind of what they were doing in the lead up to it in the Captain America books. But like in the same way you were saying about Daredevil, I feel like you could maybe do that with Batman, but I don't think it would work. I could, because earlier I was thinking about that, like Batman is very emotionally shut off from everybody, and like even his closest friends, he's very cold. And like I've seen some stories that play with him, like almost being like he wouldn't be like out here killing people left and right, but I could see him becoming like a criminal overlord sort of to like maintain control, like just losing faith in the idea of like the place being run in the way it's supposed to be, and like he would just take control to make sure things run properly. I could almost see them doing that with Batman, but being such a huge character for DC, I don't think that it would work very well.
Yeah, I honestly couldn't see that. Like, yeah, it's always such a thing, because I could see that for alternate universe or something. I could see, like, I can see something playing with that where I can imagine, okay, here's what went wrong with him, and so as long as it's not my Batman, it's fine, you know?
Yeah.
Like Batman and White Knight?
To an extent. Yeah, to an extent, though I feel like he's redeemed by the end of White Knight, and he's not, like, excessively horrible in White Knight. He's a problem, but not like a monster in White Knight.
Yeah, I guess what I was thinking of, I don't know if you guys have read War Games, but
Yep.
It starts off with Stephanie Brown saying that, well, she breaks into the Batcave and she's looking at the War Game initiative or something, where basically Batman would, through one of his secret identities, he would be running all of the gangs in Gotham City. They would all be reporting to him, but it was going to be a last case scenario, like just if nothing else worked, he would do that. And then she accidentally sets it off in the worst way possible. But like, I can see Batman having programs like that set up just in case nothing else works. And I could maybe see them getting him to such a low point emotionally where he would say, like, just fighting crime is not working. Crime keeps coming back, so I'm going to have to do something to make it stop. Like, and like I say, I don't think it would work. I think it would be met with a lot of negative fan reaction. But I could almost see that from his character. And I like Batman, but I could almost see them doing that with his character.
Yeah, I suppose. I don't know. I'm really trying to think of, like, when this feels appropriate, and I kind of just come down to the idea that it doesn't happen because it's so hard to make it work and feel natural and not feel like a betrayal of the character. Because no matter if you do it or how you do it, I feel like people are inevitably going to have the same reaction, which is, well, that's just out of character. Like, you could have a writer say, like, do a 10-year run on a brand new character that they introduced, and you had, oh wait, Hellboy. Like, the idea that Hellboy, no matter what, was going to lead to the destruction, the apocalypse, blah 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 blah. Like, people just still didn't really want to buy it. Like, it said it from the very beginning. No matter how heroic or awesome this dude is, he's going to cause the apocalypse. And people just did not want to accept that it was going to happen.
Yeah. And that's a weird one, too, because, like, and I haven't read all of Hellboy, but, like, I've read, like, 11 of the main volumes of that series, and, like, at least half of that series is stuff that doesn't have anything to do with the main arc of him becoming the bringer of the apocalypse. So I feel like if he had worked that arc through more of the series, maybe he could have made it work a little better.
I don't know. Like, I don't really know how well it works or not. I just know that, like,
people didn't want it.
Yeah, people didn't want it, even though he said that's what he was going to do. He was going to take a really heroic character and make him cause the apocalypse. Because that was just his destiny. So I don't know. That's something worth thinking about.
Do you guys read the Game of Thrones books, or are you familiar with the series? I know everyone's familiar with it, but Are you like, do you read watch the show? Or?
I watched the show.
I've never read the book. I've never read the books.
Okay, I've never watched the show. I know enough about it. Like I know all the plot twists, but I've started reading the first book, and I feel like, and maybe this is much more common in literature than I think, because I don't read a lot of prose, but I feel like Game of Thrones is a really good example of, you can take characters who it seems like they are just truly evil, and then you can try and infuse a little bit of more heroic stuff in them, and then vice versa. Like, Jaime Lannister, spoilers for the first, 100 pages of Game of Thrones, the first book, but he pushes a kid out the window trying to kill him because this kid is going to reveal something about Jaime and his sister. And so, that's a truly monstrous thing to do. But then later on, people fall in love with this character, and they try to turn him into more of an anti-hero. And so, and then there's heroic characters in that show who do some pretty awful stuff. And I think that's probably one of the better examples I can think of it's not heroes and villains, it's just people sometimes doing good things and sometimes doing heroic things.
Or bad things, yeah.
But yeah.
No, you're right. That's a really good example. Jaime Lannister, you see him and immediately everyone hates Jaime Lannister. And then you just see him at his lowest. And suddenly you're hit with this feeling so weird about all of it. It's really, really interesting how that all works out.
Yeah, and they do that with a lot of characters. There's some that you may never like, but they at least feel like real people throughout, the series.
And maybe it's because prose has a way to be able to flesh... prose typically is written by one person, and they have a lot more time to flesh out characters and have a definitive take on them. Because we were talking with comics, which is where I think most people's head will go when you say heroes or villains. When we're talking about comics, it doesn't matter what you do, someone else is going to come in down the line and probably change it. It's so rare to have a new take on a character stick. Long-term stick.
Yeah. Like the moment we get a new writer on Tom King, after Tom King's run, it's going to completely disregard a good majority of that.
Yeah, to an extent. Tom King wasn't the fucking shake-up, change the status quo every other week that Scott Snyder was. Tom King is stuck more or less to the status quo of Batman. He's changed, he's done a lot of investigation into the character's head, but still. Whereas, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a better example of all that. I feel like Jeff Johns has left a mark on Green Lantern that will never change. But at the same time, the writers after him didn't know what to do with all the other cores, so, while Jeff Johns was still writing Green Lantern, the Blue Lantern Corps got killed off. The Star Sapphires, nothing's been done with them in years until this Wonder Woman issue, which sucked. The Red Lantern Corps was had its own run for a little bit, and then it was defeated. I don't even know what the fuck's going on with Larfleeze. Did he die in Godhead?
I don't know.
Yeah, there's just he left a mark on the thing by introducing the emotional spectrum, but so much of it's just been thrown back out again, and that's weird.
And if I may, I don't know as much about Green Lantern as you do, but I feel like before Jeff Johns, there's not many definitive runs of the series. I can think of creative teams who worked on the series, but I don't know if people really cared about Green Lantern until Jeff Johns came on. And so you said that he made a mark on it, and I think that's because he's one of the first people started to care about Green Lantern when he came on. I can point to different runs and say okay, here's the Jon Stewart was active in the 70s, and then he was in the Mosaic series in the 90s and stuff like that. But I feel like people didn't there was no definitive Green Lantern run before Jeff Johns, unless you can think of one that I don't know.
I mean, Neil with Green Lantern, Green Arrow.
Oh yeah.
And Mars's run with Kyle is pretty strong, I feel, overall. It's got its issues, but still, Kyle's a pretty interesting character and way to reboot the whole universe, but that's neither here nor there now. It's weird to go back and read Aaron on Green Lantern, of all things.
Jason Aaron?
Yeah. It was early in his career.
Wow.
Yeah.
When was that?
Early 2000s, right before Jeff Johns took over and brought Hal back.
Yeah, which is weird because Johns was working at Marvel before he went to DC.
Yeah, switched it up.
I did not know that Aaron was on Green Lantern.
Yeah, it's not like long run, but he's got a couple cool Kyle stories. I'm pretty sure he created a character that was like Kyle's like youth. Like, Kyle was mentoring a gay youth that had been kicked out of his parents' house and stuff, so it was kind of interesting.
I remember reading a story with the kid where he got beat up, I think. Mm-hmm. It may have been, I think I know which character you're talking about.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just interesting to think about the fact that, like, it's so hard to make something stick because some other jackass is going to come around 5 years later and it's like, this is trash. I know how to write this better. But, like, with prose, you can make it stick. You can do these long-term setup things with characters, and generally, you're the only one writing it. So it you're the definitive voice for it. And even that's not true, though, because the fan base comes in, right? The fan base has rejected things in prose. And oddly enough, the fan base is, like, convinced the author that they've made mistakes. J.K. Rowling isn't going to retcon it or anything, but she, like, looking back, she goes, yeah, I really should have had Hermione hook up with Harry. That's just, she's like, yeah, the more I think about it, putting Hermione with Ron was kind of bullshit. I just made that choice years ago, and I'd been setting it up for so long, and then by the time I was writing the final book, it seemed like I should probably pay it off, even though I wasn't super committed to it, and now with retrospect, yeah, I didn't like that. So it's interesting.
Wouldn't it have been great if she just in the final book just said, screw it, Harry and Hermione are a thing? Yeah. And then, I didn't know she said that. That's funny.
Oh yeah, she changed her mind on that one. I don't know, it's a noodler, the way that works. We got anything else we want to talk about on this one?
I'm kind of fresh out, honestly.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap up and go for the next topic. Deadpoolzilla.
It's my turn.
Yeah. What will we be reviewing next week?
Next week we will be reviewing. I think it's time we do a comic review, guys. It's been a while.
Sure.
Yeah. So, let's review Superman Batman: The Search for Kryptonite.
Okay.
I have that one. Sweet.
I do not. I'll manage, though. All right. Sounds good. Everyone, thanks very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I'm the Comics Kid 2099.
And I'm the Don Juan of Comic-Con.
And we are your geeky gentlemen. And we will be discussing things.